Hello and welcome. I am Excellent and this is my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a little thing called Texas ghost towns. And I think you're going to like traveling along with me and learning about these ghost towns. Texas is known for a lot of things. You know, some good, some not so good. And one of those things that probably incorporates both of those is we have a state fair. And if it's not nailed down, it's going to be deep fried. It's going to be put in some batter and it's going to be deep fried. And it doesn't really matter what it is, even butter. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing, you know. But ghost towns are probably an all around good thing. So let's talk about them. See if you want to visit them. Maybe you can put them on your map when you're traveling through. It takes a long time to get through Texas. You might need to stop every 5 hours and see a ghost town. All right, let's go. The fact is that history buffs like me have long been fascinated by ghost towns. Who wouldn't be, though? Communities, cities, and towns that once bustled but are now silent, wiped away by time and dust and progress, forgotten, abandoned towns that are shrouded in intrigue and mystery. People seek these out for various reasons. Some simply want to come and admire what's been left behind. Beautiful old historic buildings fading and cracking in the Texas sun. I personally love to photograph these. I love to photograph the beauty in things that other people wouldn't find beautiful. The cracks in the bricks, the old metal that's left behind and is rusted but used to be shiny and new. So that's one of the things I enjoy about going to a ghost town. There's historic cemeteries, which I also enjoy photographing, and just wandering around and reading the headstones. That's something I love doing. And if we're lucky, one or two chatty townspeople will tell better stories than any history book. Other people are endlessly fascinated by why some communities succeed and while others failed. And they go looking for their answers. I personally love to stand in a place and imagine the bustling, the men, the women, the children, the horses, the activity that used to go on, the way they were dressed, the way they spoke, what they did, what they saw when they went into these old abandoned buildings. I'm an empath, and I love to feel that, to search for that energy, to put my hand on an old wall that maybe used to be a jail and feel that intense energy left by, or a dance hall and feel that intense energy left behind. The joy, the feeling of a lot of people, the vibration that used to go on in there. And over the past several years, thanks to social media, a new breed of ghost town chasers has discovered the thrill of these hunts. There are 3 Facebook groups devoted to images of Texas ghost towns and ruins, and they have more than a combined membership of 100,000. And on a broader scale, the Instagram hashtag ghost town, will get you more than 1 million pictures. For photographers, both professional and not, what's old is cool again. Also, ghost towns offer a summer trip or a road trip perk that's pretty good for social distancing. There are literally thousands of ghost towns scattered throughout Texas. If you ever come down through the Panhandle, it it most of it are towns that have a church, a graveyard, probably a high school, and a gas station and a burger joint, and however many people that can support that. And it's very interesting because at one point those used to be bustling oil fields, and people raised their children there, and now it's completely different. Many of these ghost towns are within a few hours of Fort Worth, Dallas area, so it's perfect for taking a day trip. Here are some of those pics. This was once the largest city between Fort Worth and El Paso. The company-owned town was built in 1886 by the Johnson Coal Company, and 2 years later was purchased by Texas and Pacific Coal Company. Thurber's mining operation provided fuel for coal-burning locomotives of numerous railroads of the day, including the Santa Fe and Texas and Pacific. Then, a brick factory was also built, and soon Thurber bricks were found at key locations throughout the state, from Congress Avenue in Austin to the streets of the Fort Worth stockyards. At its very peak, the Thurber population was between 8 and 10,000 people, most of whom were immigrant workers who represented more than a dozen ethnic groups. Various business problems and the conversion to oil-burning locomotives led to the city's demise. In 1933, during the Great Depression, Thurber abruptly shut down, closed its shutters. At last count, the population of Thurber was 5 souls. There are more historical markers in Thurber than people. Over time, many of the buildings have been dismantled or crumbled on their own, but several remain, including the town's smokestack, built in 1908 as part of the town's electric power plant. The restored St. Barbara's Catholic Church and several small red brick buildings made with Thurber bricks. 2 buildings have been converted into restaurants, and there's also a museum. Thurber may very well be the most photogenic of all Texas ghost towns. Against the nighttime sky, stars shimmering above, the town's red brick remains offer a breathtaking sight. Burkett. If Thurber is a great beginner's ghost town, Burkett is the next level up, with a lot to see and explore. Found on State Highway 206 in west central Texas, about 2 hours from Fort Worth, Burkett was named in 1886 for its very first postmaster, William Burkett. For years, the town flourished. There were cafes, a school, a cotton gin, a drugstore, churches, and various other businesses, and you can bet at least one cemetery. In the 1950s, Highway 206 was built nearby, but it bypassed the town's businesses, leading to the city's downfall. According to the 2000 census, at that time, only 30 people remained. However, there is so much to see, including the abandoned red brick school building, a 1920s gas station, several old homes from the early 1900s, and most impressively, a truss bridge built in 1922, and you can still drive across it. But don't take my word for that. Many of the town's streets are overrun with foliage and abandoned vehicles, giving this once thriving community a spooky last house on the left type of vibe. Explorers and Instagrammers are gonna love it. Prophet, Texas. So, this is a ghost town Bible. It's called The Ghost Towns of Texas, a book written in the 1980s by Texas historian T. Lindsay Baker. Because many of these ghost towns won't even show up on your GPS, Baker's book is gonna be a necessity for ghost town adventure. Well, Here's going to be a little bit of a problem when you're going by the book, though, but stick with it. The guy's directions are a little out of date. So you're going to have to use your own noggin to figure out what he's talking about. I'll give you an example of some of his directions, okay? See if you can figure this one out. To go to Prophet, drive west from Newcastle 7.3 miles on U.S. Highway 380 to a paved country road leading north. Take this paved road 1 mile north and then west to the end of the pavement in the center of the former town. Well, you might not be able to find that pavement. Or what country road? What the heck? So Prophet might be one of the hardest of the ghost towns to find, but you'll find it, and it'll be worth it. There's an historical cemetery, which contains both marked and unmarked graves of the area pioneers. I love that part, including members of the Robert Smith Prophet family who established this area in 1862. Prophet's tiny little cemetery is one of the most fascinating and eye-opening in this area of Texas. Its numerous interments of children and infants paint a very somber picture of the often harsh realities of frontier life. According to a historical marker, the largest number of burials here occurred between 1910 and 1920, and it includes the victims of World War I era influenza epidemic. Also interred here are veterans of the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. The historical marker also points out the unmarked graves of 3 young men who were ambushed and killed by Native Americans in 1867, an incident for which Prophet is best known for, as those are the cemetery's very first 3 graves. The town was a flourishing farming community from the late 19th century to the 1920s, but quietly faded away when several of the farms consolidated. While you're in the area, visit nearby Fort Belknap, which is a majestic complex of 19th century buildings originally built in 1851 to help protect the area from the Kiowa and Comanche attacks. Now, this is the thing I love. Imagine stepping that far back into history. Just standing there, closing your eyes, and feeling a time in history where they had a complex built to protect from Native American attacks. That is just mind-blowing to me. There is a tiny museum and a little cafe, but they had to close down at the beginning of COVID. I don't know if they're open yet again. But even if they're not, it's really lovely to roam the picturesque, shady grounds open year-round. Then we're going to move on to the Grove, 2 hours south of Fort Worth on Farm to Market Road on 1114. The Grove is the most tourist-friendly ghost town in Texas. It's camera-ready. Half a dozen buildings have been refurbished and are well kept. It's listed on all the maps, paper and digital, and it's really, really easy to find. You drive around a bit and you'll find a handful of friendly neighbors too. It's not exactly abandoned yet. Established in the latter part of the 19th century, the Grove, named because of its abundance of live oak trees, was once a bustling community with a general store, several cotton gins, a blacksmith shop. The general store was called Dub's, and it's currently owned by the descendants of the original townspeople. For years, it was a museum filled with antiques, which were often borrowed from movie companies. And now the building stands still and quiet. there is a note tacked on the window, and it says, "May reopen sometime in the future." Even then, there's still a lot to see, including the blacksmith shop, a filling station outfitted with a period gas pump, and several other 100-year-old buildings. A filling station. For those of you who are not as old as dirt, that's a gas station. I remember that my grandparents, referred to gas stations as filling stations. Probably my grandparents. I haven't heard that term in, 100 years. In the town center, there is a water well. It was built in the 19th century by pick and crowbar. Interestingly, it is actually still in use. Then we're going to go to Indian Gap. And like many Texas ghost towns, Indian Gap could completely disappear at any moment. And as a matter of fact, it is nearly demolished completely. There had been a 2-story red brick schoolhouse built in 1913 that is now gone. All that remains of this school are its twin cement columns that once guided students through its entrance. Other parts of this community remain intact, though, but some of these buildings are behind barbed wire on farmland, and that farmland is roamed by easily excitable livestock. Anybody who was here towards the beginning of my channel knows that just do not go and trespass. I'm giving you some sound advice right now. Virtually the only sounds you're going to hear here are the cows. The structures are still visible from the road, though, and their eerie, faded exteriors are a must-see for ghost town lovers. The community dates back to 1857, and according to the Texas Historical website, texasscapes.com, it was named for the nearby gap in the mountains through which Native Americans often traveled. It prospered in the late 19th century to the mid-20th century and was home to a hotel, a weekly newspaper, and, of course, a general store. P.S. You gotta know, there's a church in there and a cemetery. A cluster of about 6 original buildings found near the intersection of Farm to Market Roads 218 and 1702 includes the general store, whose worn sign reads, Carl Reinhardt, dealer in general merchandise. I love that. I'd love to get a picture of that. This particular building isn't behind barbed wire, so you're going to be free to admire up close its tin facade, its creaky stairs, and its original hardware, which is where you would find me taking photos. A few steps away, you'll find an unusual sight. An old farm building swaying to the right like it's slowly falling asleep. And last, but certainly not least, Carlton. 142 years ago, things were looking pretty good for Carlton. A booming agricultural forward town named after early settler F.M. Carlton. It was lucky enough to grow near a well-used wagon road, traveled by merchants eager to trade and spend. Thanks to the arrival of the Stephenville North and South Railroad, the town continued to flourish for quite a while. In 1920, Carlton had a population of almost 1,000 people, and it boasted 3 of everything. 3 general stores, 3 grocery stores, 3 churches, 3 cotton gins, plus a pair of banks, a lumber yard, and various other businesses, and a graveyard. The surge in popularity brought on by the railroad was also taken away by the railroad when its line was discarded in 1940. Carlton began to decline, illustrating the power that railroads wielded over small Texas towns. But what remains is one of the most impressive ghost towns in this neck of the woods. Take a spin through its streets and you're going to see antiquated homes that look as though their occupants simply got up and left. Old pieces of furniture are strewn about, and cars that haven't been revved up in years wither and rust away in the Texas sun. This town still clings mightily to life. If you go, you might see residents coming out onto their porch, peeking to see what you're doing there, looking around. You can go walk through the dilapidated bank building. There's a nearby gas station that still has the original equipment and still works. One of the other bank buildings was burned down. But feel free to walk around. And if you are inclined to want to go see some of these old ghost towns, maybe check out Ghost Towns of Texas, written by historian T. Lindsay Baker. But remember, he's got some of that. And on the right by the grocery store, you take another left until you hit Mr. Paul's old cow factory, blah, blah, blah. You got it. But you'll get there. And there's thousands of ghost towns here. So whether you live here in Texas or whether you're going to be coming through, maybe you live in a neighboring state, maybe you're in New Mexico, Louisiana, or Oklahoma, come on over. Come see, feel, photograph these spectacular cities and towns that once bustled with life and where you can now sometimes just hear a cow mooing. Thank you for coming. Please give this video a thumbs up, and also if you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do that. And if you're able to and you would like to, please go ahead and donate to this channel. Again, it's www.patreon.com/exitlight with the E capitalized. Thank you. Good night.